Okay, so something that I really wanted to talk about in a video is mordant, M-O-R-D-A-N-T. Whenever you're researching and learning about dyeing fibers naturally, you will come across that term, and basically it means it's just a way of having the dye adhere to the textile better. To create a bond with the fabric, you need some sort of mordants, and there are many types of mordants. The one that is most typically used is this one, which is called alum, but the complete name of it is potassium aluminum sulfate. And you can get this in the grocery store in the aisle with the spices and things. It's something that's used for pickling, so that's why you'll find it there. Now, this is what I use. I've never used other ones such as iron. I hear people talk about oak galls and pine and all of that, and I don't have any of that, and I don't have an interest in it. And to be totally honest, I really don't want to be using this. I want to be using something that is just local to where I'm located in Hawaii. So in my research, I learned that ancient Hawaiians who dyed fabrics naturally, they used, let's see, 3 things that I read about. One was urine. Probably not going to be using urine on mine. Another was ocean water. And then the third one was something I can't recall right now, but I'll put it on the screen. Now, in the past, when I was designing clothing many years ago, I actually did, I was playing around with Olena back then, turmeric, and I did take some of my pieces to the ocean and put them in the water in order to see if that would help the dye bond better to the fibers. Turmeric is one of those dyes that tends to just fade over time in general. So, although it did, it did seem to last for a little while longer than if I had not done that. It did eventually fade anyway. Now, in my most recent research, I learned that, so one thing that I didn't say, tannin. Tannin is a substance found in things like oak gall and certain pine needles, things of that nature, that is really useful when you're dyeing natural fibers. And some plants and leaves and plant materials contain high amounts of tannin, like oak galls. Oak galls, something that forms on oak trees, and people use those for mordanting. They have high concentrations of tannin. I was recently doing research. I was just looking around my yard thinking, like, what can I use to mordant? Like, what do I have already? And I learned that there's a high concentration of tannin in noni fruit, and that's what this is right here. This is noni. It's very common here in Hawaii. Lots of medicinal properties in noni fruit. Some of the plant materials can also be used to dye fabric. I'll be experimenting with that soon. But I learned that the seeds of the noni fruit have high amounts of tannin. So the other day I got one of these fruit that had fallen under the noni tree and was decomposing, and I just kind of smashed it out and let the seeds dry. So I've got this mortar and pestle. However, my pestle is missing. Is that the stick part? My girls had it. I don't know where it is now, but I'll find it. But for now, I'm going to just use a stone, one of their stones they had for rock painting. And I'm just going to see if I can do this. If not, I may have to boil this and just make like a liquid tannin solution. There's some more to be said about tannin that I may have to just put on the screen because I wasn't really prepared to talk about it for some reason. I almost forgot that that's what I was talking about in the video. But I came out here to do to mordant some fabric with alum. And so I made that video, and then I was like, oh, I want to make this video about tannin and noni fruit, and kind of forgot, that that's what I was going to do. So many of the dyers who I've watched on YouTube, you know, they order, a lot of them use this right here. They use the alum, but many of them order, what's it, oak gall powder from different websites to use in their dyeing. Now, in some of the books I have, you know, it's mentioned that you can just use this alum by itself, but I think perhaps maybe the outcomes are better for the dye staying on the fabric if you combine alum with tannin, with some substance that has a high amount of tannin in it. So since I've never used tannin, I'll have to do a comparison to see if my items that I dye with only alum, how long the dye lasts, and then the ones that I maybe do a combination of to see how that works. And I think, you know, I only use plant fibers. I only use cotton, linen. So far, that's what I've used. I don't use wool or silk, things like that, protein fibers. So for my reading, my understanding is that plant fibers need, you know, they do better if you use tannin as well as the alum. If you're doing wool or silk, perhaps you can just get away with one or the other. But many of the dyers who I've seen online, they use wool or silk, things like that. And the colors do tend to be more bold when you're using protein fibers. I just prefer plant fibers, so that's what I use. So I'm going to try to get all these seeds out. What's wrong? You coming down? My little assistant might be coming out here, and it's pouring down raining. Sure. Okay, so I think I got as many seeds out as I can. I was really happy to find out that that noni has a high concentration of tannin, because I was just like around the yard, like, what do I have that may have tannin in it? And what we have a lot of, it's red ginger flowers and leaves. For my research, those have no tannin. We have a lot of banana leaves. You know, we just have different things in the yard. But I was like, oh, what about noni? Because, you know, noni is really, I don't know. It just seemed like it might have tannin in it to me. Just something about it. I could not find any research on the leaves of noni fruit. I think that would actually be easier, because you could just dry them out and grind them up more easily than these seeds. But I did find research that spoke specifically about tannin in the seeds of noni. And so we have so much noni growing, it's just, you know, it's just readily available. So that was easy. So, rain. Yeah, rain. Okay, so that's as much as I'm going to get out of those. And I'm going to go ahead and see. Oh, I found one more little piece. Let's just give it a chance here. It's not totally dry though. Okay. So, I'm going to see if I can crush these up. This is not really doing much at all. But I did get out a lot of seeds, so that's a plus. And let's see if I can crush this seed. So I feel like if I can crush the seeds, the good stuff inside can come out. You know, I'm used to seeing people use powders for the mordant process. However, for this, it may be more convenient for me to boil it and have a liquid tannin solution. This is all experimentation for me. So we'll see. Sorry, baby. Okay, so I think I'll try that. I think I will just boil all of this. This is just dried fruit. This could actually be Noni leather. You know how you can get fruit leather in the store? I think I've seen that before in a health food store. But this was dried in the sun. And actually, I don't want to use the fruit part in the boiling. Fruit tends to have high concentrations of sugar, so I'm assuming it's the same for this noni. Okay. And who knows? Who knows if this is going to help? I wanted to talk about this. I just wanted to talk about it. Since there is so much to research and learn about preparing fabrics before you dye them when you're doing natural dyeing. Okay, so I think we're going to set up this pot over here and see if we can boil this. Now, one thing I forgot to say about using different tannins and mordants is that depending on the color of the solution, it will affect the color of your fabric. So for instance, a lot of people use iron, like they may use rusty nails or just iron powder and different other forms of iron to mordant their fabrics. And particularly things like rusty nails, they will have an effect on the color. I've only used aluminum and the alum, and it is clear. I think that's one of the benefits that people like about it. So for instance, this is my mordant container here, and this is just water with the fabric and the alum dissolved in here, so it's clear, so it's not going to affect my fabric. My fabric is white, it's going to stay white. If you're using other things, it may affect the color. So for instance, this noni solution, you saw that it has like a brown or greenish brown tint to it. So when I go to dye my fabric, it's definitely going to affect the color. So you just kind of have to be okay with that if that's what you're going to do. I'm going to just do a little test. I'll dip this piece in, which was actually already dyed with some Olena. And you can see, so this itself becomes a form of dye, but we're using this as a tannin solution, not so much a dye, but my fabric will be yellow. So whatever I dye with after I dip it in this, you'll just have to see what color you come up with. I forgot to mention that I have used pomegranate rinds as a tannin solution before. There's a high concentration of tannin in pomegranate, the rind of a pomegranate. So I have used that, and I did the same process. I boiled it, and it does give it like a little pinkish red tint. So that's just something you have to be okay with if you're dyeing fabrics naturally. Or if not, just stick to something clear like the alum, and then perhaps you can find some other tannin solution. Like I think the oak gall powder comes in, it's like two different colors. Like you can have a white one or one that's more of a brownish color. So if you're going to use that, maybe you can lean more toward the white one. If you don't want your fabrics, if your fabrics are white and you want them to stay white, just try to find solutions that work for that. So this is probably good, but I'm going to give it a few more minutes, and then I'll put it in a jar. That actually smells really good. I was saying earlier how noni doesn't have a pleasant smell, but it actually does. It's one of those things that you just kind of get used to when you've been around it a lot. It's really yeah, it's really fruity. It's maybe tangy is what I'm looking for. But this really smells good. Like I almost want to drink that. So yeah, noni's a really cool plant. I didn't mention earlier that my oldest daughter, her nickname is Noni. We call her Noni. We called her Noni, you know, early on in my pregnancy because I drank so much of Noni juice when I was pregnant with her. So we were calling her Noni when she was still in the womb. So this has been a part of our lives for a long time. And yeah, it's a really awesome plant. So I'm happy to find out that it has tannin in it. It could also be used in dyeing fabrics.